What's up, everybody? It's Brandon. You're watching Glassworks YouTube channel. Today, we're going to get started on putting the inverter back together for the Civic. I'm going to show you what I got so far, and we'll go from there. So far, I got the bearings in. If you look, right there's a notch. They'll only go in one way on each one of the bearing journals, all the way across. Of course, you want to put assembly lube on the inside of the bearing. Put it on the outside of the bearing when you get ready to put the crank in. On this right here, you got these thrust washers. That little bitty notch goes facing out on both sides. And that's going to be between your third and fourth cylinders. So, I'm going to get them set up. I'm going to get the camera set up. And I'm going to get the crank picked up and dropped in. Give me just a second. Alright, now I got the crank in, as you can see, and just make sure when you put the crank in, you don't put it in backwards. This end right here, the snout, goes to the front, not the back. I have had to take motors apart that have put together backwards, couldn't figure out why things weren't working right. Anyway, next step is going to be set the girdle. You do the bearings in the girdle the same way. You just set them down in there. You make sure they're sitting flush all the way across on both sides. No overhangs, no overlaps, anything like that. Then the girdle will only sit one way. You see this plug right here? It goes into that hole right there. And be careful lowering it down. Of course, I've already got it. All my bearings are lubed with assembly lube. They're nice and sticky. So all you do is you line it up. You set it in place. Put a little pressure on it and it'll lock itself in place. And then there's going to be 10 bolts that go in here just like this. They're going to look like head bolts. Just like that. Just drop them in. I always drop them in and kind of hand tighten them, and then I go back, use the service repair manual, and tighten them down to the torque specs, which I'll get that here in just a minute for you. I'll put it on the screen in the description, something like that for you. And we'll get all this set up. Make sure it's torqued down correctly. And then we'll go to the next step, which will be, of course, I'm going to have to re-ring my pistons. And then we will set the pistons in. But you always kind of want to check your rotating assembly. Make sure it's going to rotate good and there ain't no catches, no dragging, things like that. You can see it's rotating good. Turn it by hand. Don't turn it with no tool. I mean, you could probably put a socket in the end of it and turn it like that if you wanted to, but don't grab it with the pipe wrench, pliers, or nothing like that. You'd be surprised how many times I've seen people do stuff like that. Alright, well, I'm going to go get my book. We'll get the torque specs on it. When I get all that situated, I'll get it torqued down and I'll show you from there. Alright, I'm back now. I got my my repair manual here. And if this is a single overhead cam, that is going to be the tightening sequences. 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll do it just like that. First time you'll do them to 18 foot-pounds of torque, and then I believe the second is 38. Give me just a second and I'll verify that. Like I said, anytime you're doing any of this kind of work, you definitely want to have you one of these Haynes or Chilton repair manuals. Let's see, the first torque step is 18 foot-pounds of torque. Then you go back and do them again in the same sequence to 38 foot-pounds. Now give me a second. I'm going to get all these tightened down and I will get my torque wrench out and we'll time-lapse this and show you what we got. Alright, one thing on here I did do, and I forgot to mention, is one of these 10 bolts is going to be longer than the others. That longer bolt goes right here. So you're going to put them all in and just kind of hand tighten them down. then you'll do your torque sequences, which is I'm about to do now. So let me get this set back up and we will get y'all situated for that. All right, the first step is going to be 18 pounds. And I'm going to do them in the sequence that it shows on here to do them. All right, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is right here. And here it click. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. All right, after you do that, get that 10 done, then you go up to the next step. I believe was 38. Let me double check to verify. I got my book here off camera. Yep, next step is 38 foot-pounds of torque. So we'll take a torque wrench, back it all the way down to 0, and then we'll go up to 38. And then we'll do the same steps we did before. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Two. I still double check myself every time. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. All right, when you do that, of course, that's the 2 sequences you do. And also, I'm using a 14mm socket for this, and just a standard 3/8 drive Husky torque wrench. When you do this, you want to make sure you use kind of a quality torque wrench. I've used Harbor Freight ones before, and sometimes they just don't work that great. So something like this, if you got to go rent one, borrow one, whatever you got to do to get a quality torque wrench, I'd suggest it. Now, give me a minute and we'll start with getting the next step ready, and I'll be right back with you. All right, next step we're going to do is going to be putting in rings on the pistons. You see you got 1, 2, 3 rings. I've got a box full of brand new rings here. I'm going to sit down and do this off camera. What you'll do is you'll just put the ring, each ring that fits in its specific spot, and you want to turn it to where all the gaps on the rings don't line up. Now when I get it set up, I'll show you what it's supposed to look like. Give me a few and I'll get this one done. All right, now when you open up your piston rings, you'll have, they should be labeled like this. This top ring, this is the second ring, and then you have 2 that are labeled 3. What happens is you'll have one of these right here on the bottom, this will be in the middle, and then there'll be another one of these on top. So it'll be 3 rings in one setup. So let me get all these set and I'll be back. All right, now I've got all the pistons with the new rings on them. you can see now, of course, the rings are going to be kind of springy. That's all right. You just want to make sure that these gaps all don't line up each other, get blow by. Next step we're going to do, we'll flip it upside down like this and put a bearing in. We do these bearings the same way you did the crank bearings, main bearings. Stick a bearing on it. And of course you want to lube up in here first. Put a bearing on it. Only go one way. It's at the little tab, little notch right there. I don't know how well you can see that. But then when we get the bearing in, we'll roll the motor over. Put some black hose over these bolts so you don't scratch your crank and all that stuff up. And then we'll drop it in. And then we'll put the other bearing on and the other bearing cap. We're going to do that all across the motor. So I'm going to get this set up, get you on a time lapse, and we'll get this going and go from there. Alright, well apparently my time lapse didn't work. My battery died. Anyway, when you're doing this, you want to make sure that each one of these pistons, they've got a little arrow on them. They point towards the front of the block. Now I've got all the pistons lined, the cranks lined up, the pistons are set. Now I just got to get a ring compressor to compress these rings down so I can go ahead and just tap them in. I've got to see if I can find mine. If not, it's going to end up being tomorrow. So, see what I can find. If not, I'll be back with you as soon as I can. What's up, everybody? I'm back. Now, you see I already got one piston in. The assembly, some people do it differently. I put the crank and shit in first. A lot of people do the pistons first. And doing it the way I did it sometimes just makes extra steps. What we're doing is we're just putting the pistons in. We're using the spring compressor like this. 12 bucks from Harbor Freight. All you do is you get it loosened up. You put the piston in. Compress the rings. I kind of do it off camera the best I can here. You're kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. You just when you want to put it in, you want to make sure some of the skirt is visible. You'll put it in and you'll just ratchet it down like so. And of course you want to make sure your arrows, which you can't really see in there right now, but these arrows are facing towards the front. It'll say IN for intake. It'll be on your intake side, of course. So you see how I've got a little bit of the piston skirt left. You just put that down there, press it flat, and get you a rubber mallet, wooden mallet, something like that, and you just tap it in. Check your rings, make sure they're tight, and just keep tapping it in. Sometimes these cheap compressors can be kind of a pain in the butt, and they don't want to seat right, or you'll have issues with the ring on the bottom popping out just like that. So I'm going to get these rings in, and I'll be right back. Rings and pistons in, I'll be right back. Working on the motor, trying to get it back together. Compress the rings, go slide the piston in, and all of a sudden, that pops out. So we're on hold until new pistons get here. Alright everybody, so we're back. I got all the pistons in finally. Had a bunch of issues with that. One of my stock pistons, first it broke. The rings were oversized, and when it collapsed, it popped the top of the piston off. Ordered some supposedly OEM quality pistons, And due to poor casting, as soon as I go to put the wrist pin in, it gets 3/4 of the way in and it freezes up because of the burr on the inside. And going to get the wrist pin back out, piston cracks and breaks, so I sent it back. So made a junkyard run and got a set of stock pistons out of another Y7, which actually happened to be the only one in town, fortunately. So I got all the rods, pistons in, new rings in, everything like that. Where I'm at now, I ended up having to take the girdle back off so I could go ahead. Because when I put these new pistons in, rods in, I didn't put the lower rod bearing on before I put them in. So I could go ahead and just take this off and make sure everything's lined up correctly. I've already got this one in. And when you do these pistons or the rods, anything like that, on your rod cap, it's going to look like this. That little notch is going to go just the opposite of the opposite on the, see right there, you can see that little notch. Well, this notch on this cap's going to go on the other side. And also, it'll have a part of a number. Can't really make it out right now. And that number is going to be on the intake side. I don't know how well you can see it. See if I can get some light in there. See, it's got part of a number right there. And then that will match up with that. Okay, somehow I got the wrong fucking... Alright, I was starting to freak out there thinking I done messed up somehow. That was a part of a 2. It had some juice running down it. I thought it was a 4, and I was like, I ain't got another piston marked 4. But anyway, put this in there, and those 2 halves will line up. Now I got to put a bearing in before I do that. And of course, I already got that lubed. I'm going to re-lube this section, put another bearing in. Of course, the bearing will have an ear that'll lock right there. So let me get all the rest of these done, and then I'll get back with you. Alright, I was going to show you this. You see that ear, that tab is what I was talking about. It's going to go on the opposite side. Oh, over here. Let me see. So, it'll be on the opposite side notch of this right here. So you got the notch on that side and the notch on that side. So they'll line up just like that. And then this number will go over here. Now that number does not always correspond to the location on the piston. It just, some of the rods are numbered, some are 2s, some are 3s, some are 4s. So it'll go in there just like that. And then you'll just tighten it down. Alright, I'm going to get the rest of them done and I'll be back. Alright, now I've got all the rod bearings in, bearing caps on. Now, they're 12 millimeter, so what you're going to do is go to each one and torque them down to, the guide says, for connecting rod bearing cap nuts, 23 pounds of torque. So I'll get my torque wrench and I'll set it down to 23 pounds and I'll torque those down. I'll be right back. Right, now I've got all these torqued down to 23. What I did was I hand tightened them first down until they were snugged. And then I went back and torqued them with the torque wrench. And then after I got done with all of them, I went back and double checked all the way across the line. Now I'm just going to put the girdle back on the top. I've already showed y'all that once before in the torque sequences. So I'm not going to put that back in here again. So I'm going to put all this back together and I'll be back. Give me just a moment. Alright, now I got all this tightened back up. First torque sequence was 18 pounds. And then go back again, do it all at 38. Of course, double check your torques. Now, next thing I need to do is I got to put the box on. I got to put the tube for the water pump and the filler neck thermostat housing on. I got to put the water pump on. Then I'm going to start on the front of the block. So that's all going to be next. So I got to get all the parts together, get them cleaned up, and then when I get back, I'll show you what we're going to work on next when we get to it. Alright, so I went ahead and put the thermostat housing on and the tube on. I cleaned up the water pump housing hole, or the hole for the water pump and the water pump. But the new gaskets that they sent me, the damn gasket for the water pump is too big. So I'm going to just mess with getting the oil pump on for now and figure out that gasket here in a bit. So I'm just going to, I've already put the new front main seal in, and now I'm just going to slide everything on. I got to put some gasket seal between the block and the oil pump on the back side here. Run outside it, mated edges, put some gasket seal on it, and I'm going to slide it in and torque it down. And I'll get them torque specs and everything like that in here in just a second. And when I get all that done, I'll tell you the torque specs and everything like that as well. Alright, I got the oil pump put on. All I did was some RTV gasket sealing around it. I used this stuff right here. It's called Right Stuff gasket maker, 90-minute gasket maker. I put a thin layer all the way around the edge of the water pump. I'm sorry, the oil pump. And then I torqued all these down. They're supposed to be like 96 inch-pounds. I don't have a torque wrench that does inch-pounds. It does Newton meters and foot-pounds. So I looked up the conversion for it, and it turned out to be right about 8 pounds, or 8 pounds is what it said. So I did all these bolts at 8 pounds. These on the end down here as well. Now I went ahead and I set the tensioner back on, and I'm getting ready to put the lower timing gear on. When you do this little ring, it's concaved. If you can kind of see it, the concave goes to the back. Now you can see where it's been rubbed in on the gear. You can see it wore out. And then when you do the gear, you'll make sure you did not lose that Woodruff key. Mine is still actually in the gear. You'll put it in just like that. Line that gear up. Put it in. That's all there is to that. Alright, now I am going to go. I'm going to figure out what my next steps are, because I can't do the water pump because I got to wait for a new gasket. So I may go ahead and roll it and put oil pan on. And then, of course, I need to put the accessories and sensors in on the block. And then go from there. So when I figure that out, what I got to do, what I'm going to do, I'll get back with you. So give me just a bit. Alright, so I went ahead and put the PCV box back on. I got the water tube on, of course. I went ahead on the front here and put the sensor on. It's not set where it's tight yet because I still got to put the belt in. But put the oil temp sensor and a NOx sensor. Yes, this is a D16Y7 block, but I'm running a white head, white ECU, white wiring. So for the mini-me swap, you go, put the NOx sensor in. Pretty much all I've got left to do for now that I can do is I'm going to rotate the block, wipe the surface down again, get my oil pan cleaned up, and I'm going to go ahead and get my oil pan bolted down. And then next step will be putting the rear main on. I can put the front motor mount on, and then it's just waiting on getting the water pump in, or the water pump gasket, so I can put the water pump on, and then I'll do the timing, and then it'll be ready to go back to the car to put the torque converter and flex plate on, put the transmission on. I'm going to set the motor and transmission in the car before I put the head on. That way I can get easier access to the rear motor mounts. So as I get all this stuff done, I'll kind of show you as we go. On the last part of the video, I was showing you we're going to put the oil pan on. A buddy of mine come by, helped me get the motor moved over here back to the concrete. And we got a little ahead of ourselves, so we put the flex plate on, torque converter on, transmission on. I got the motor mounts in. I got the extended plate on this side. I got the extended right there. I still got to put the one in the back. But I had to wait on that water pump gasket to get it here. So I got it this morning, so I'm fixing to put the timing belt back on, and then I'm going to set the rear motor mount, and then we're going to set the front, and then it's going to be just wiring everything back up, putting the head on and all that good stuff. So when I get to the next step, I'll get back with you. Alright everybody, it's been a little bit since I messed with this thing. Last time I told you I didn't have the head or anything on. This time I've got the head on, timing belt on. Everything's set up. I had to actually re-drop the motor down because right there, I don't know how well you can see it, I had to clearance this section out right here for that crank pulley to not hit the frame rail. So I dropped the motor down, grabbed a big freaking hammer, pound that out where I get some clearance. I got it all in. I also had to work to where, drop it to where I could get in there. Down in there's a hole to adjust the tensioner, to loosen the tensioner, put the belt on. Well, if you've seen my other video with S10 or you've seen the shorts, I thought I had a failure on here where I thought I had a spun rod bearing. Turns out that wasn't the issue. What I did, when I set the timing, before I tightened that bottom tensioner up, I didn't hold tension here and turn the timing, or turn the crank to put tension on this side. I had the tension on this side. You see how that's loose and that's tight? Mine was just the opposite. So what it was this side was loose and it's causing that tensioner to bounce and rattle. So it caused me thinking I'd spun a rod bearing. Pulled the rod bearing, or the oil pan off, got underneath and looked. Rod bearings were good, so I was thinking main bearing. So I kept looking and looking, trying to figure out how to go about doing these bearings, because for these Hondas, it might have 4 different bearings, 5 different bearings on the crank, and different bearings on the main, or on the rods, which I haven't been that far into a Honda motor before. We're doing rod bearings and main bearings to have ever had to do that. So I'm sitting there thinking I messed up because I ordered standard bearings all the way across. Well, fortunately for me, like I said, it wasn't that. It was, I had the tension on the wrong side of the timing belt. I fixed that. I still had to put the oil pan gasket, get it back in, put the oil pan back on, hook up the exhaust, get water in it and everything like that. But we got it all back together, and I did just a quick little test fire, busted it off just fast enough to hear it, to make sure there wasn't no more rattles, and sure enough, that fixed the problem. So now I just got to get the oil pan gasket on, get the oil pan back on, and just button up the exhaust, things like that, and it should be done. So I'm gonna get all that stuff worked out, and when I get done, I'll go back over everything with you. And after that, we'll get us a test start and we can hear it running. Alright, now before I put this oil pan gasket on, I was going to show you here. The book says put it right here in these corners, right in here for the around. It says do it like that area for the VTEC engine. The non-VTEC, it says basically just put it right in here. But what I always do, or to do it right, the best way to do it, I'm going to go from about right here, down this galley, all the way up. Do it on this side too. Well, you can push the gasket in and it'll hold it in place. Now these D16 motors, they come in a Y7, Y8, various different variants of the D16. I have a Y7, but I've got the VTEC head. Yeah, I did a mini-me swap, and I've got the Y8 head on. Now, the oil pan that I've got is still the Y7 oil pan. It's the steel gasket. You see I got that dent in there. That's one of the reasons I left the steel pan on. It's because if I'd have put the Y8 oil pan on, it wouldn't have dented. This is from being low, riding low, things like that. If you had the aluminum pan, that would have busted completely out. That's why I use the Y7. So when you do your oil pan gasket, you got to know what oil pan you have. If you got steel pan, you got Y7. I think the Z6s came with these. But if it's an aluminum pan, it's going to be a Y8, and it's going to be a completely different gasket. The gasket will actually have like a groove for it to sit down inside of. So on this one, like I said, I'm just going to put the gasket here, let it sit for a bit, and then I got to get back underneath the car, clean the bottom of the block back off, the mating surface, And then I will put this back up, and I will do the bolts back and forth. I don't think there's not really a bolt sequence per se, but I will look and see if there's a torque sequence, and if I find one, I'll let you know. So give me just a second and be right back. Alright, you really can't see it right now. Ignore the dogs. There's not a sequence, but there is, let's see, oil pump or oil pan to engine bolts, 104 inch-pounds of torque, which I think is like 9 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna get all this situated, and then I'll be back. Alright, I got the Field Pro gasket. I believe that's the number right there, OS30690R. Yeah, that's the gasket number there. Now when you get ready to put this on, it only goes on one way. I had it up there and then I bumped it off. These little tabs right here, the ears will go to the front of the oil pan, and it'll have this little rubber gasket right here, a little lip that holds it to the inside. So what you'll want to do is from here to about here, you want to put a thin layer of silicone from here to about here on this side. I don't know if you can see it last time, but from about here all the way down to here, put a thin layer of silicone, let it sit for a minute, and then put your gasket. Now, I've been seeing a bunch of mixed reviews on these Field Pros, but this is what they had available. It even came with a little bit of RTV. So I'm gonna put it on here all the way down, let it sit, and then I'm gonna do it again on this side, or get it on both sides. And then I'm gonna put the oil pan on, gasket on, and let it sit, kind of get it cured a little bit. And then I'm gonna get ready to put it underneath the car. All right, I got everything underneath hooked back up, oil pan on, oil plugs tight. Went through and tightened up all the oil pan bolts. Got the exhaust back on, hooked up. Got the cross member underneath the transmission to the block hooked up. I've got the dust shield put back on. I got it full of oil. Got it full of water. So I'm letting this battery charge up. I got a bad battery. Let it charge up, and then I'm gonna fire it off. But that's pretty much it on my rebuild. Hopefully, you know, it'll help. But I'm gonna try to get a video of it starting up first. That way maybe everybody can see it, see how it's doing. Hopefully I didn't mess it up worse than I thought. I'll be back when I get ready to start. All right, I'm about to give it a try and see if we get anything yet. Heck yeah. She's alive. Not seeing any little leaks this time. Good thing, good thing. Water bubbling good. Uh-oh. Alright, looks like we got it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you like, comment, subscribe. Have a good one.